On the coldest nights of the Middle Ages, when rivers froze solid and wolves howled beyond the walls, castles did something that seems impossible today. They stayed alive, inhabited and functioning without central heating, electricity or modern insulation. Imagine that for a second. You step into a stone fortress, walls thicker than a city bus, and instead of it feeling like a freezer, it holds on to warmth, slowly, stubbornly, almost defiantly. Here's the paradox that hooks us. Castles were built of stone, the very material we associate with cold, yet people survived inside them through winters that killed the unprepared. How did a structure designed for war become a machine for survival? And why do many of these tricks still outperform modern homes during power outages? Tonight, as we step into torchlit corridors and frostbitten battlements, you'll discover that medieval builders understood something about heat, airflow, and human survival that we've largely forgotten. And once you see it, you'll never look at a castle or your own house the same way again. To understand how castles survived deadly cold, you have to imagine medieval winter not as a season, but as a threat. Months of darkness, damp air, icy winds, and food scarcity, especially during the so-called Little Ice Age, when winters grew longer and harsher across Europe. Castles weren't just military symbols, they were population centres, housing lords, soldiers, servants, families, animals, and stores of food, all needing protection from the cold as much as from enemies. Builders learned through brutal trial and error, watching which halls became unlivable, which towers trapped deadly damp, and which designs quietly kept people alive. Over generations, knowledge passed not through textbooks, but through stone itself. Thicker walls here, narrower windows there, hearths repositioned after someone nearly froze. These structures evolved like living organisms, adapting to climate, geography and human need, and by the High Middle Ages, castles had quietly become some of the most resilient cold-weather shelters ever constructed. Now, imagine walking through a castle step by step, because every detail mattered. First, those massive stone walls weren't just for defence. They acted like thermal batteries, absorbing heat from fires, bodies and sunlight during the day, then releasing it slowly at night. You know, the way a warm brick stays hot long after the fire dies. Windows were small and deeply set, reducing wind penetration while funneling precious daylight inward. Fireplaces weren't randomly placed. They were positioned along interior walls, sometimes stacked vertically, so heat rose through multiple floors, warming rooms above. Floors were layered with rushes, straw, and sometimes animal skins, trapping warm air and insulating feet from frozen stone. Even staircases were often spiral and narrow, slowing airflow so cold drafts couldn't race through corridors. And here's a forgotten trick. Castles were designed to be occupied densely in winter. People slept together, animals were sometimes kept below living quarters, and body heat became part of the heating system. It wasn't comfortable by modern standards, but it was brilliantly efficient. This is where medieval ingenuity suddenly feels very modern. Today we rely on constant energy input, furnaces, heaters, grids, but castles were designed to retain heat, not endlessly produce it. Thermal mass, the principle behind thick castle walls, is now reappearing in passive solar homes and earth-sheltered buildings. Strategic window placement mirrors modern energy-efficient design. Even the idea of zoning, closing off unused rooms in winter, comes straight from medieval life, where entire wings of castles were abandoned seasonally to conserve heat. In survival scenarios, power outages, or off-grid living, these principles still work. Reduce airflow, cluster heat sources, insulate from the ground, and let mass store warmth. The shocking truth is that medieval builders solved problems we're still struggling with, not through technology, but through understanding how heat actually behaves. So when you picture a medieval castle buried in snow, don't imagine misery and frozen stone. Imagine quiet resilience, walls holding warmth like memory, fires glowing against the dark, and generations surviving because someone understood how to build for winter, not fight it. These weren't just fortresses. They were lessons in endurance, adaptation, and respect for nature's limits. In a world facing energy uncertainty and harsher climates, the past is suddenly speaking again, reminding us that survival isn't always about more power, but smarter design. If these forgotten tricks changed how you see history or your own home, consider sharing this story, subscribing for more journeys into lost knowledge, and keep asking the question medieval builders asked every winter: how do we make warmth last when the cold refuses to leave?